But yeah, basically, like, there's definitely a segment in every community that wants a safe space. And I don't mind putting that safe space up in, like, a private Discord or something, but it's not going to be the channel itself. It's not going to be the videos. It's not going to be the streams. We will entertain all ideas here, and that's how it is.
A few moments later.
Oh, a guy who I banned gave me $10. Thanks for the free $10, buddy, but I'm banning you here too.
Hello everyone, Ace here, and today let's talk about Short Fat Otaku, and why so many people believe that he argues in bad faith. And yes, for those curious, I will be having plenty of sources to work with. To be honest, I have had a couple of people suggest over the past few months that I cover Dev over some of his more recent actions, and some of his less than stellar moments. For the most part, I have chosen to avoid doing this, because most of the time it boils down to petty drama, which can be summarized as Dev disagreeing with someone like Archer V, or on occasion Sargon of Akkad. And I do get people's interest in that, but ultimately it always read to me as petty drama, and also at least at the time of little consequence, as Dev is still on reasonably decent terms with Arch V and Sargon. So what has changed since then? For a start, Dev decided to come up with a little plan to show just how intellectually superior he is to his own audience, by claiming in his video titled Analyzing the 2024 presidential debate fallout that Trump had lied, and then waiting about 20 minutes before actually going over some of the lies that he believes Trump made, with the hopes that most of the rightoids in his audience wouldn't actually watch the video all the way through, and would have instead left mean comments, or just ask what exactly Trump lied about.
Well, let's be real here. Most people didn't tune into this for an actual discussion of any real policy issue. They were here for political theater. But let's go over content anyway, at least a little bit. I have to admit though, I pulled the wool over your eyes, at least for a few of you guys. At the beginning of the video, around 2 minutes in or so, I casually dropped the exclamation that Trump lied during the debate, and then I just skimmed right over it. Why did I do that? Because I know for a fact there's going to be at least a couple of retards out there who are watching this video right when it releases, who heard me say that phrase, and then immediately left a comment screaming, "OMG, Dev has Trump derangement syndrome. He can never back up any claim he makes. He's an unhinged communist," before getting to this part of the video where we actually go over Trump's lies.
And granted, to Dev's credit, he was able to find a handful of examples, one of which he promptly pinned. However, the overwhelming majority of right-leaning individuals who watched the video appear to have instead watched all the way through, and were then promptly pointing out that some of the lies that Dev believes that Trump made were in fact actually the truth, meaning that Trump wasn't lying. And if anything, the context that Dev tried to provide to prove that Trump was lying actively made his statements all the more accurate.
The problem they have is they're radical, because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby.
This time, Trump is just lying out of his ass. The quote he's referring to is from former governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, who held office from 2018 to 2022. Northam's quote comes from an interview he gave with a local radio station, WTOP, back in 2019. Listen to it for yourself.
For the sake of time, I'm just going to skip ahead to when Dev shows the full context version of the clip that he thinks magically makes Trump a liar.
Now that does sound pretty bad, but what Trump did, and what every other dishonest rightoid does when they talk about this story, is leave out the wider context of the conversation. They always cut out what Northam was saying before the clip.
And governors, you know, the issue of abortion rights emerges every year in the General Assembly session, this year no exception. There was a very contentious committee hearing yesterday when Fairfax County Delegate Kathy Tran made her case for lifting restrictions on third trimester abortions, as well as other restrictions now in place. And she was pressed by a Republican delegate about whether her bill would permit an abortion even as a woman is essentially dilating, ready to give birth. And she answered that it would permit an abortion at that stage of labor. Do you support her measure, and explain her answer?
Yeah, and I wasn't there, Julie, and I certainly can't speak for Delegate Tran, but I would tell you first thing I would say, this is why decisions such as this should be made by providers, physicians, and the mothers and fathers that are involved. there are, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. But again, we want the government not to be involved in these types of decisions. We want the decision to be made by the mothers and their providers. And this is why, Julie, that legislators, most of whom are men, by the way, shouldn't be telling a woman what she should and shouldn't be doing with her body.
And do you think multiple physicians should have to weigh in, as is currently required? She's trying to lift that requirement.
Well, I think it's always good to get a second opinion, and for at least two providers to be involved in that decision, because these decisions shouldn't be taken lightly. And so, I would certainly support more than one provider.
So now that we've seen the clip in all its glory, let's move on to exactly how this ties into Dev being intellectually dishonest. Because granted, it could just be a bad take on the part of Dev to reach the conclusion that Trump was lying in his statement here. That, however, is a defense that falls completely by the wayside when we talk about the comments section. Because, as previously mentioned, for everyone who decided to ask what exactly Trump lied about, and therefore got trolled by Dev as a result, there were several individuals who did in fact watch the video all the way through, point out exactly why Dev was in fact wrong in his analysis, to which Dev would respond to, only to get further BTFO'd in his own comments section. At which point, Dev would every single time oh so conveniently and mysteriously fail to notice these new responses, pointing out how he is only digging himself further into a hole. No one can look at this and honestly believe that Dev failed to notice every single time that he was getting corrected in this manner. So the end result is that this little plan by Dev to prove that his audience simply doesn't watch his videos all the way through, and that they are far more close-minded than he is, not only backfired because the vast majority of people actually watched the video all the way through, but also backfired because it became an excellent example of what Dev acting in bad faith looks like. He will instantly run for the hills the moment anyone is able to call him out in a way that he simply cannot counter. Here is a literal dozen examples of Dev doing exactly that in the comments section of this one single video. Now, some of you may be wondering why I am being so harsh on Dev here, because people seem to think that I am somehow on good terms with him. Granted, that was once the case. There's a reason why my channel was, for example, featured in Dev's 100,000 subscribers celebration video as a channel worth checking out. So yes, I used to indeed be on good terms with Dev. Those times have well and truly ended though, to the tune that Dev has decided to actively not only ban me, but treat me as a person non grata. The most recent example is from the Daily Sip that occurred yesterday, where I posted a super chat and got this reaction. Please keep in mind that Dev does this after claiming that his YouTube channel chat is a free speech platform, open to all ideas, not like those extremists like V or Arch.
But yeah, basically, like, there's definitely a segment in every community that wants a safe space. And I don't mind putting that safe space up in, like, a private Discord or something, but it's not going to be the channel itself. It's not going to be the videos. It's not going to be the streams. We will entertain all ideas here, and that's how it is. Oh, a guy who I banned gave me $10. Thanks for the free $10, buddy, but I'm banning you here too.
Amusingly, right after banning me from his free speech platform, Dev immediately goes on to patting himself on the back for how his channel is very much in favor of free speech and how he openly condemns the idea of safe spaces, before then immediately going on to explaining why he is totally justified in banning people for wrongthink. The particular wrongthink offense in this case being that you believe that Dev is acting in bad faith, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the very act of banning people for such wrongthink proves that yes, Dev's YouTube channel is in fact an echo chamber, that he isn't the free speech platform that he claims to be, and that this is in fact more evidence of him acting in bad faith.
Oh, a guy who I banned gave me $10. Thanks for the free $10, buddy, but I'm banning you here too. Zerg, $2. Why is Arch's chat special? Or you? What do you mean? I don't know what you mean by that. But thank you. Mervinu, $5. Based. All ideas entertained is rare nowadays, it seems. So sad. That's how I feel about it, man. Like, if the right wing is correct on an issue, you should be right wing. If the left wing is correct on an issue, you should be left wing. It's as simple as that. Like, you should go where the evidence goes and not care so much about whether it's good for your side. Like, there are some guys in the chat, sometimes Neon Reagan's like this, definitely that Brent lol whatever guy, lolarker guy it's in my chat. These guys are like, no, truth does not matter. We live in the post-truth world. Whatever is good for my team is what we must stand by. And it's like, no, fuck you. No. You should be able to entertain everything. Kenrick, thanks for the $10, dude. Well, I do think you're wrong about a lot of things. I do believe that you believe you're right instead of being disingenuous. It's the same reason I like Sargon, even though I disagree with him a lot. Here's something I've been doing recently. Like, there's people who say, Dev, you're wrong about this issue, and here's my critique. Completely fine. Sometimes they have good critiques, sometimes they have bad critiques, but that's completely reasonable, right? Then there are people who show up, and they're like, Dev, you're fucking stupid. It's like, okay, like, you can insult me. Insulting me is fine, all right? If you're just saying, like, yeah, you're dumb, and I think you've like completely missed the mark on this, and like, fuck you, okay, fine. I can tolerate like a foul mouth, okay? But then there are people who show up and they say, Dev, you're lying. Dev, you're bad faith. Dev, you don't actually believe this. At this point, I am just like banning those people because I'm tired of dealing with them. I'm tired of like, they say, Dev, you're lying to us. You're evil. And then I'm just like, okay, here's my reason as to why I think you're wrong. And it's a good faith reason. You can disagree with the logic, but at least I'm laying it out for you. And I'll post that to them. And they'll say, no, Dev, you're evil. You're wrong. You're bad faith. You're going to make, and it's like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with dealing with those people. I'm just done. I've reached my limit. I'm now just banning those people.
So now that we've covered that, though, I do believe I need to provide some backstory and explain exactly why I've become a person non grata, and why Dev has went from recommending my channel to instead doing his best to censor me. What horrible crime did I commit against him, you may ask? Well, it has to do with a certain presidential election, and for the purposes of YouTube, I am going to talk about the importance of the 1970 Chilean presidential election. Now, for the purposes of this video, I will mention that Dev likes to use Wikipedia to back up his claims. So in response, let's look at Wikipedia as well and see the importance of the 1970 Chilean election, which, if you look at the Wikipedia article on election fraud, the 1970 election in Chile is one of the main examples used for election fraud via the spread of misinformation, in this case by the CIA as well as, for the record, the KGB, although the Wikipedia article itself doesn't actually mention the KGB. The point is that the use of misinformation by government agencies for the specific purpose of influencing an election result is enough for an election to be considered fraudulent in nature. So hypothetically speaking, if a different election just so happened to involve the news story of a certain laptop linked to one of the candidates, which just so happened to have incriminating evidence against that candidate, and a certain federal government agency went out of its way to claim that the existence of said laptop and information on it are merely the propaganda of a foreign power for the specific purpose of ensuring that a candidate that they like would win, well, technically that too would indeed constitute an example of election fraud in its own right. Needless to say, I've had multiple back and forths with Dev over this, very publicly I might add, to which he ultimately tried to use argument from authority fallacies by claiming that because the government found no wrongdoing, then clearly absolutely absolutely nothing actually happened. You know, the government agencies that, hypothetically speaking of course, would have been involved in said fraud, and whose word therefore probably shouldn't be trusted as the unquestionable gospel truth. So once I commented on the fact that Dev was essentially treating the government as God and the supreme authority on election results, that is the point that he decided that I needed to become a person non grata, and that he needed to distance himself from me because I was arguing in bad faith. As a result of this discussion, Dev has become so furious with me that he has engaged in guilt by association fallacies, resulting in him making me unfollow him over and over again. Longtime viewers will no doubt know that I have a long-standing reputation of constantly hitting the follow button for the specific purpose of trolling deranged lunatics who believe in guilt by association, and so I have repeatedly done this to Dev ever since. Now, to tie up some potential loose ends really quickly, let's go back to that image of the Wikipedia article I showed you earlier. You probably noticed the other examples of misinformation causing election fraud, which happen to involve conservatives from Canada as well as Republicans in the US. And to be clear, I believe that anyone who does stuff like this needs to face the full fury of the law. I do not believe in double standards, and I do not care if my side does it or any other side. It still should be punished. But you want to know who I can prove believes in double standards, and who will demonstrably refuse to condemn his guy when he does it? Well, that would of course be our good friend, Short Fat Otaku. As I previously stated, there were multiple conversations over this very topic, and one of the previous ones from 2023 was back at a time when Dev admitted that yes, hypothetically speaking, were this to happen, then said government agency did indeed try to steal the election, but since the plan backfired, there is therefore no fraud that took place, and as a result we shouldn't hold neither the government agency nor the candidate that hypothetically would have benefited from said action to any amount of responsibility, nor should we even question results of said hypothetical election. Of course, once Dev started railing against a certain other individual over a certain memo that Dev likes to strawman about by claiming that the memo was illegal, so illegal in fact that it required US Congress to pass a brand new law to make it illegal years after the fact, well, once he started condemning the candidate who tried to push said memo as irredeemable and utterly unelectable because of it in his eyes, well, it became very inconvenient for an individual such as myself to post what he had said previously about the laptop story. And so Dev had a very convenient change of heart, and all of a sudden no longer believes that the government agency intended to do that. And of course, to question this change of heart would be to argue that Dev is acting in bad faith, which of course would get you sent to the gulag in his channel. A gulag that exists because Dev does not believe in safe spaces, and thus runs his YouTube channel as a free speech platform for everyone to have a voice in, just so long as it's not a voice that he doesn't like. Of course, it would be very inconvenient for him to believe what he believed earlier about said laptop story, because were that the case, then even if you took the most uncharitable interpretation possible of the memo that he likes to bring up at every single opportunity, then he would ultimately have to admit not only that that memo was 100% justifiable and that the candidate that pushed said memo did nothing wrong by pushing it, but also that the candidate that is on his side of the political aisle and that he has therefore been handling with kid gloves this entire time is the actual irredeemable scumbag. And of course, doing this would be him having to admit that the things that he has believed for the past few years have been unjustifiable lies. His entire worldview would have to come crashing down, and he would have to come to the grim realization that he has engaged himself in an ever-desperate purity spiral to maintain his ever-delusional worldview. And even if you take the most charitable interpretation possible of his words and trust him at what he says, well, the fact that the older tweets show him openly defending the suppression of a news story, which he admitted at the time constituted constituted an attempt at stealing the election, and his defense for the record being that it didn't work, therefore it's somehow acceptable, or at the very bare minimum, he believes it's not as bad as the actions of the person he describes as not only a worse president than George W. Bush, but also the worst president in US history, period, including people like Woodrow Wilson, a man heavily responsible for bringing the Klan back, and who he also believes called for violence by saying that people will not be disrespected, and then failing to explain how this is somehow a call for violence, despite being asked multiple times. This also, of course, leads me on to another classic example of Dev being bad faith, the whole both sides are equally bad argument that he likes to bring up all the time, which he brings up so often that he's outright desperate to find examples of right-wingers doing anything near as bad as left-wingers, hence why he had to claim that this tweet somehow encouraged violence, despite that being at the very bare minimum an extreme interpretation, to say the very, very least. An interpretation that, when actively questioned, he of course fails to provide any meaningful answer. And when I say that Dev uses the both sides are equally bad argument, it is worth noting that he's specifically talking about people like myself, who happen to be centrists for the record, along with the most farthest of right-wingers on one side, and only the most extreme of the far leftists on the other side. And while it is technically true that he is willing to criticize moderates on the left, it's still very obvious that he treats them with comparative kid gloves, to the tune that he refuses to view Biden as being too bad to be voted for, despite the fact that he even previously admitted that he believed that Biden tried to do the same thing that he thinks Trump tried to do, only earlier and in a way that would completely vindicate Trump's actions, even in his most uncharitable interpretations of Trump. But because it's Biden, an individual who is far more politically aligned to Dev, it's not a big deal when he does it. And again, even if you take the most charitable interpretation possible of Dev's words, notably that he no longer believes that Biden intentionally did it, the sheer fact that he used to believe that Biden and the FBI did it, and yet didn't think it was a big deal back then when they did it, is still solid, hard proof that Dev argues in bad faith. That he is a pure tribalist who doesn't actually uphold the principles he claims to uphold. In truth, the actual principles of Dev are to win for his side, and to avoid losing for his side, because he simply does not give a fuck about principled failure. For those who want the sources, I will of course be providing a link to them in the description below, so you can check them out should you so desire. I will also be archiving them on my own to ensure that under no circumstances can Dev get rid of this evidence of his behavior. I do trust that this video adequately explains why people believe Dev argues in bad faith, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say in the comments below. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.